Hey, it's Eva again. I wake up ambitious people like you and dare them to be great. And today we're going to have a really interesting conversation because I have as a guest Johan Wouters, one of the 3 co-founders at Nemesis, and he has a lot to tell. So it's probably going to be a very long episode, but with only super interesting insights. We're going to talk about 3 things today. First of all, how do you notice that founders of fast-growing companies are not using their full potential? Secondly, what most of you are been waiting for, what to do about it, how to spot it and how to solve it if you notice that you as a founder are not using your full potential. And then thirdly, a sneak peek into the 3 co-founders themselves, because a couple of months ago they were maybe using 70% of their full potential yet in building Nemesis, and it went up to 90%. And how that went, that's something that you will hear at the end of the episode. So welcome, Johan.
Thank you. What an introduction.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to discuss a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So what I notice is, or the most people that I coach or that I'm drawn to, that I find interesting, they are always very passionate about something. They want to create a change in the world. They want to make a difference. Yeah. So my first question is, what's the difference or what's the impact that Nemesis wants to create in this world?
Yeah, great question. So Nemesis, we are, like you said, 3 founders. So it's not the maybe traditional story of one founder that starts from a frustration or a vision and then makes a business around it. There are 3 different people here with 3 different backgrounds. They came together and we came together around some shared frustration and vision of what we want to do. And how we articulated it for ourselves, I would say, is we are hoping, or we are building a world that is meaningful by design.
Okay.
And so that thing, making a world that is meaningful by design, for us translates through helping brands find clarity. And if we help brands and organizations find clarity, then automatically more meaning arises.
Okay. And at this helping brands find clarity, you talked about there were some frustrations. So how did it start and how did you 3 said, okay, this is now what we're going to do?
Sure. So we have quite different backgrounds. And Sydney, for example, who's not here, has lived through an organization that lacked all meaning, that was not clear about why they were doing what they're doing, where they were going. And you get situations where companies work against each other, where within that organization don't have clarity, so they don't align on where to go. And maybe without any bad intentions, they might end up working against each other. That's typically one of the things you could see. That's what he lived through. And so he understood, okay, that's not what we want. I've lived through many organizations that have done rebrandings, some better succeeded than others. I've seen how the industry approaches it. And I couldn't deal with the branding agency approaching branding as a design exercise solely, because I cannot look you in the eyes and tell you with a new logo you will sell more, because it's basically not true. But it's really about alignment. And for me, that was one of the main drivers to say, I think the branding industry could deal with like a kick in the butt and do it again.
All right. I like that because it's a bit similar to coaching. I mean, yes. It's the way you look, the external achievements that you have, in the end, they don't create the fuel that comes from within. So you also need that internal alignment. Yeah. So you're doing for organizations what I'm doing for people.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So I think that's probably why we connected so much as well, because there is a clear overlap or similarity with what we do. Yeah. We're doing it more holistically on the organization level. But even that holistic work starts from a founder or a series of founders working together. So it still works on the individual, but we're doing more of a bigger change management exercise with the entire organization. But that is exactly why we often work together, because those founders sometimes need a bit deeper work and working on some of their own limiting beliefs or whatever, where your work is extremely impactful.
Yeah. All right. Thanks already for the compliment. We're going to dive into those limiting beliefs a bit later, but what I want to know first is that alignment, that entire transformation process, how do you then do it differently than how other branding agencies do it?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I would say, or I would claim that most branding agencies don't even pretend to do it. They just do design. And
Okay.
they just give you a new visual identity. There are some, by the way, agencies in the world that do great work and actually also try to have more strategic impact. How we do it, we start by what we call radical immersion. So we go into organizations and we spend time with them. We try to find the gaps between what is said, what is lived, and what is written. And somewhere in between, we understand, okay, this is who you really are. This is your DNA. We speak with the people. We do interviews, no matter the size of the organization. So it can be companies of like 20 people all the way to 10,000 people. So we'll do interviews. We'll also do qualitative and quantitative data collection at scale to make sure that everyone feels heard and we understand, okay, what's really going on within an organization.
Right. And what happens if things come out of it that the founders really didn't intend to or don't like?
Well, typically, if a founder is engaging with Nemesis, they're very much prepared and aware that they're looking for the things they don't know. And so they know that by doing this exercise, they will learn more about the organization. And most of them understand that you have to do this without ego to go just get to the truth. Because sometimes you find amazing stuff, things that you didn't know were part of your values and principles, but then turns out lives very strongly within the organization, and then that's a gem and you can use it. And sometimes you some things emerge like, okay, we need to work on this. In all contexts, it's a win because you learn something and you can improve afterwards.
Yeah. Although sometimes it can be a bit confronting. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be definitely confronting, absolutely, but it's part of the game. Yeah.
It's part of the game.
Yeah.
All right. So if you then look at these founders and these organizations, what are, according to you, the three main things that make them lose clarity and make them go into the direction that doesn't allow for that consistency and that alignment?
So an organization that loses direction or doesn't have clarity on where to go, it's typically a top-down problem. It means that the leadership is not clear about what they're going, and more ultimately, it's the founder or the CEO's level that is not working. Out of my experience, we're typically working with founder-led organizations, meaning organizations where the founder is still very heavily involved, either in a CEO role or any type of operational role within the company. So typically, the problem starts there.
Okay.
If the leadership doesn't know where to go, it's very hard for it to percolate down to the rest of the organization. And then why do they find themselves in that context? Is because of there's a change in context, typically. So it means it can be a business context. The organization is scaling rapidly. You've been a 10-people company and now you're about to be a 100-people company. That's a very big changing business context that definitely puts you in a situation that you're not ready for, potentially. So that's that. It could also be the other way around. You're a big company and it's going very badly. There are market forces that are pushing your business to suffer, and then that's also something to deal with.
Yeah.
Or it can be a pivot that you go for a new market or whatever. So those are all business contexts, I would say. And then you can also have personal context. Is that maybe you go through something hard in your life. We've had clients who lost children or maybe had diseases or whatever. And those things mark your life. You start to challenge, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And that might have a huge impact on your business. So typically it's a business or a personal context that changes, which puts you in a new situation that you need to deal with. And then your limits get tested because you can hide some flaws that you have. You can hide some self-sabotage you've been doing in the past until the context changes, and then you get put in front of a new thing, and then they come out way worse.
Yeah. No, and it's very typical with steep growth. However you put it, if you have external consequences or not, steep growth is just inherently, it means that because you grow so fast, there will be growing pains much sooner than what's normal. So it's very inherent to steep growth. So and do you then rather see it as skill, something that they're lacking certain skills, or is it more often that they have certain limiting beliefs that at these moments pop up where they all of a sudden become aware of, or that, they can't really hide anymore?
Yeah. So it depends. So we're talking about two things at the same time. So you have the organization level and then the personal level.
Yeah.
I think if you have an organization and competent people around you, then the priority is to fix the corporate direction. And so, like, as an organization, where are we going? And let's clarify that. Because then the weakness of one individual can be hidden a bit longer and can get time to get solved before you reach something. So if the organization is clear about where to go, they have clarity and everyone is aligned, then we can all start working that direction, and we buy time for ourselves as individuals to work on ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's a combination most of the time.
Yeah, because very often a founder can really block, even though if there's organizational clarity.
Absolutely, yeah.
If the founder doesn't go along with it, the organization cannot either.
Absolutely. And so most of the work we do ends up being change management, and then making sure that people get on board from the lowest to the highest rankings in an organization. But it starts with top down. So the founders and the leadership teams need to fully embrace a direction and also have clarity about how themselves are helping that system move or potentially blocking the system.
Yeah. Okay. And so you said, okay, you have on the organizational level, you need to create a kind of direction. And then what's then on the individual level or the founder level?
Yeah, so because we are working founder-led, typically the reason of being, the vision of the organization is very closely linked to the personal vision of a founder or a series of founders.
Yes.
And so, which means that the reason of existing for that company is also almost the reason of their existence.
Yeah.
And so if you start linking those very closely to one another, it also has some consequences, because it could be a consequence when you end up selling the organization. You also lose a part of your identity, for example.
Yeah.
But it can also be that if something is going wrong with the organization, you start linking it to something going wrong with yourself, or you might end up being the biggest bottleneck of the entire organization.
Yeah.
And that's where personal limitations, limiting beliefs come into play.
Yeah, and that's something that I come across a lot, that people really identify with what they do, with their title, with their progress, with their success, rather than with who they are. And it's really how they lose their power to be free to act towards what is necessary, rather to the change that they believe they have, because they're so linked with their identity.
Absolutely. And it very much depends on how much it hurts their business. So when we work with clients, some clients are very open to change. They understand that they might be part of the problem, and within that entire change, they want clarity for themselves. And so they end up having a discussion with you typically. We can send them over to you because they are already willing to do that. Some other clients can't really accept it yet and are just... they might be part of the problem, or they're maybe showing some behavior that will end up hurting the organization, but it's not doing it just yet. So there's no real urgency to change it just yet, but they might at a later stage get those blockers come into play.
Yeah, it's typically in self-sabotage, it happens in phases. The first phase, the gain from the self-sabotage is much bigger than the pain. And if they're in that phase, no way that they're going to change anything.
No, exactly.
Even though the organization suffers. For them, it's not an incentive if the numbers are, for example, still good. So they need to really be in the level where the pain from the self-sabotage starts to outweigh the gain.
I'm a firm believer that people don't change unless there's a reason to, and it has to hurt to change.
It has to hurt. Yeah. Do you help them to feel the pain, or is it something that
to point it out potentially? So we can, and I think that's what the immersion does, because by speaking to everyone in the organization, a brand ultimately is that sum of the people within. And so if you understand what all of those people are going through, and then empathy arises, and you start to see potentially the impact you might have. And then we ask questions, is it the impact you want to have? And then it becomes evident. So it's not about making it hurt for them. It's maybe about pointing stuff out that they haven't seen before.
Again, making the clarity.
Clarity.
Okay.
That's it. If you have clarity, you can make decisions.
All right, good. Interesting. So typically to overcome self-sabotage and to step into your full potential, there's always 3 steps that you need to go through, or that's what I believe. And the first step is waking up. It's that awareness, what we just talked about. Okay, how do I know that I'm not using my full potential? Because a lot of people are not using it, but they're not aware of it. So my first question about these 3 steps, the waking up, is how do you see, like on a very concrete level, that founders of these fast-growing companies are not using their full potential, like very concretely? What do you see? What do you hear? How do they act? Maybe you have some examples.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things we notice is that either when you're the bottleneck, so if you have a plan, you want to change, you want to grow, you're giving it all. Okay, every minute of every hour I'm working, and we're still not really moving in a meaningful way. That's a sign that maybe you're the problem. So that's one. Maybe practically what I hear or what I see is people who who focus too much on control and like really want to control everything happening in the organization, every communication. If they end up really clinging to that, that's a bad sign. Micromanaging, very linked to that.
Yeah.
Those are things that you see in organizations.
And I can imagine if you're founder-led, because you did it at a certain point, that it's so easy to keep doing it and to keep your fingers where they don't belong.
Especially with single founders. So if you have one founder and that was used to working alone, basically, they had an idea, then start hiring people, then they tend to really cling to control and to not giving away responsibility. I'm also myself, by the way, very guilty of that.
That's what I want to say. It sounds recognizable.
It's true. It's absolutely. It's exactly that. So that's one thing. You see it less, I think, if you have a group of founders, because they typically balance each other out. They also keep each other accountable.
Yeah.
But those type of things, I think, would be very visible.
Okay, good.
Also, sometimes you see the opposite. It's like not being able to make decisions, for example.
Okay, yeah.
It's also something you see.
Indeed.
You're the founder. You're supposed to be the one who makes decisions, or the leader, and they don't. That's also like it means like you lack clarity. If you can't make decisions, you lack clarity. So on organization level, that's one problem, and then there may be some personal, deeper problems why you have difficulty with decision making. Yeah,
I recognize myself in it, and it's not because I cannot make decisions, but it's just because there's always more options. Like my brain is like a popcorn machine.
It keeps generating options.
It keeps generating options, so it's making options, decisions, but 10 decisions, whereas you just need to make one decision.
I just heard, I think, a podcast 2 days ago about with Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah talking about do not three. I don't know if you heard that thing. It's about a technique of a shoes salesman, that if someone comes in to buy a shoe and they say, okay, I like this shoe, can I see this other one? Okay, you bring the other one. And if then the client says, can you show me one more? Then you ask, which one do I put back? So there's always a decision between two things, and that's very easy for the brain to do. If you have an overload of options, you freeze. You paralyze, you can't make decisions anymore. Yeah. While if you have just two choices, you just make one. So 2, not 3.
That's a good tip. Yeah. It's like going to a local store. There's also just one type of rice.
Exactly.
And one type of...
much easier.
Yeah, it's much easier. All right. Do you have an example of a client where you really saw them sabotage themselves, or about 2 clients?
Many, honestly, because I think at some level everyone does some self-sabotage. You might have clients that in their growth, like we said, cling to control and want to very much... take control of a situation, not give everyone real authority, which is an atmosphere that's not ideal to hire high potentials, for example. Mm-hmm. If you want talent, and you need talent in your organization, but you end up not giving them authority level of freedom, then you lose them very quickly. So that's one of the organizations we worked with that really had that problem. And it was a great guy who really had a great vision, wonderful to work with, and despite himself almost was clinging on to control, leading to people not want to work there anymore. Yeah. Which was not a bad intention, just like an unconscious thing that they did, which was very much a blocker. And then we've had the other way around, people who are very insecure. We worked with a restaurant chain where the founder was extremely brilliant, to be honest, really had a vision, had a cool way of seeing things, perfectionist, really did amazing work. But was really insecure and didn't really try to commit to anything. He made half decisions. He never really went all the way, which was felt. You could feel a brand that was not clear about what they were, because they were a bit of everything, because they couldn't really commit. And once we did the rebranding and we got over it, now it's a very clear position brand. So that's where the founder really was visible within the brand, almost, even individual stuff.
All right. Interesting. Yeah. So the second step after that, you're very aware of what you're doing to not fully step into your potential. The second step is to make a decision, and that decision it's not only looking at why is the controlling, the insecurity a bad thing, but it's also looking at why is it a good thing, or why am I actually doing it? Like which consequences are there that are good? Because you never do something over and over and over if it doesn't bring you something in a way. So this person that was insecure, or this other person that was controlling, what were the consequences, the good and the bad?
So the fear of losing something is way more is more powerful than the potential gain of something else.
Yeah.
That's like a human thing. So that's what you need to get over. And so what you've seen in the past is that people are maybe not willing to change, not against it per se, but don't really want to commit to change because they're really afraid of losing everything that this self-sabotage has gained them.
Yeah.
And typically, most of self-sabotage is there for a reason also, because it protects you against something or it gives you something else.
Yeah.
But you're very much limited in your growth. So you will hit a plateau for whatever happens.
Yeah.
And so it's about understanding that, it's not about what you can lose, is that you're actually blocked of growing, not reaching your potential, which is something that really resonates with me. And really what got me to make a decision is that I was not so much afraid about what I was about to lose, but I'm not reaching my potential. I'm actually not getting to where I could be, which was way more scary for me than losing the little things I had.
Yeah. It's also a sort of losing, but because it's not concrete yet and you haven't experienced it yet, it's less tangible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, all right. Great. So the consequences are there. So always be aware of what it brings you to sabotage. And then finally, the daring to be great, that's more the action part.
Mm-hmm.
So what 3 tips would you have to founders of fast-growing companies that recognize some of this in themselves? Like which 3 tips would you give them to activate their potential a bit more and ditch what doesn't serve them any longer or what blocks them?
Aim for clarity. Whether you do it with Nemesis or not, aim for clarity and try to find that clarity. That would be tip number 1. And I think the most important is be able to explain why you're doing it in a simple way.
Yeah.
Too often we see organizations with mission statements of pages long. It's impossible to remember. They will live in a drawer somewhere and never really be operational. So make sure that whatever your strategy is, it's actionable, it's clear, and everyone can understand, no matter where in the organization. So work on clarity. That would be number 1. I think number 2 is involve everyone. So I think many organizations think they have clarity because they've decided it together with the marketing manager and people in culture officer, and they've done it in a meeting room and they're all very proud. Oh, look how clear we are, and we'll send a mail to everyone, and now it's clear for everyone. It's definitely not how to get any change done.
Yeah.
So people need repetition, people need to be involved most of all. It's not just about saying this is who we are and now you better say this is who we are. If you want to be who you are, you need to involve everyone. No shortcuts there possible. You need to really involve everyone.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think those 2 examples are maybe more macro on the corporation level. And I think finally, on the individual level, is be open to work with someone like you, to be honest, because those are type of things that in the 3 founders, I was probably the most skeptical one of doing that type of work. But being open to do it really changed my life and really changed the way we look at things. And now I'm even recommending people to do this. And they're all thinking I'm crazy. But I think do that type of work. Be able to invest in yourself as a founder. Understand that you're typically the limitation for any potential growth.
Yeah.
And so in retrospect, that investment is very small compared to everything you get back. Yeah.
Indeed. All right, great. So creating clarity for yourself, involving everyone, and involving someone that can help you to work on how you can fully step into your potential as an individual.
And you need that outside perspective, because you can read as many self-help books as you want. It will do nothing.
No.
You need an external person that can challenge you. And that's pragmatic, which is the exact reason why I love working with you, by the way, is because you're pragmatic. And then when you work with founders, with business people, they're maybe not all waiting for the yoga and the green eating grass and all that type of stuff. I don't think not everyone is waiting for that. So some people just need pragmatic stuff, like, okay, what am I doing wrong? What's the impact of what I'm doing wrong? Where is it coming from? And how do I solve it?
Yeah.
And which is what I loved in your approach, by the way.
All right.
So,
Great, thanks. You said you were skeptical before. So what was the trigger for asking me in?
The trigger. Good question. Oh, sorry. The trigger was through our work. We've identified what a problem looks like. So we've seen what happens if you don't solve certain things.
Yeah.
At an organization level, we can deal with it ourselves because that's what we do as a company. At a personal level, we at Nemesis are not equipped to do that stuff. Where we can talk with founders, we can help them find their why, but we cannot work on their limiting beliefs, on maybe deeper stuff and where it comes from. we're just not equipped at doing that. But we've seen the impact in other organizations. And so when we've seen all of that, we've started asking ourselves, okay, we probably have that stuff as well, but it's just not hurting us yet. So we could probably do another 10 years and be fine. It is hurting us, by the way, in ways that we don't really see or maybe not super evident. But we could have gone on for like 5 more years, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we don't want to end up in 5 years or in 10 years and it'd be a real big problem and really cost us energy, time, money, whatever, resources. And so we just thought, let's do a preemptive strike and let's see what we can do and how can we work better together and make sure that, especially our interactions, I think, how the 3 founders, me, Yael, and Sydney, work together, we wanted to keep that as smooth as possible and make sure that we don't sabotage each other.
Yeah.
And so that was the decision, I think, to like, okay, let's try this and let's see. That's why when we started, before doing anything, we asked you to come observe us and just like, okay, how do we interact with each other and what's going wrong?
Indeed, yeah. And I really love that because you did it so proactively, and not a lot of founders do it proactively. They typically come to me when there's a problem or when one of them is really not feeling good in their role anymore, when it hurts. And you came to me and you just asked, okay, there's nothing wrong. We think there's nothing wrong yet, but we want you to observe us and to be brutally honest.
Which obviously wasn't entirely true. We knew stuff that irritated us, stuff that wasn't just perfect.
Yeah.
It's never perfect, but things, and we knew some stuff was probably... we could have improved some ways of working, collaborating, communicating, most especially. So we knew that, but it wasn't hurting anyone. So indeed, there was no real urgency. But we've seen too many examples of organizations where it could go wrong that we thought, let's not have that happen to us. Especially because we have someone like you in our life. So let's just use it.
Let's just use it. Yeah, indeed. No, and what I noticed when you already had a lot of systems in place where you give each other frequently feedback on what you're doing well, how you're really contributing to the company, what changes you saw, but also what you didn't see change yet, where there's still a lot of room for improvement. So the way that you're already taking this on, I thought it was really impressive, especially for 3 co-founders that are so driven to grow and like growing the numbers. And I was surprised to see that there was so much room for that personal development already.
A world that's meaningful by design for us means also a world where we keep learning and can evolve. We're also very aware of that. It's very much one of the things that drives both Yael, Sydney, and myself is keep learning and evolving. So we stole all the best stuff we saw in the world in other companies, to be honest. So I've worked at companies. I was blessed to work at organizations who did some of this stuff very well. So I copied whatever worked there and I thought was useful for us. And we've applied it for ourselves as well as for the entire organization. And we're still challenging it, by the way. I've had one of our employees speak about this to me. It's like, okay, it's great and we're all getting good feedbacks and 360s and whatever you can imagine. But we'd love also to give you guys feedback in a formal way, which we've actually never thought about, but we probably should. So we're putting that into question every day.
All right, good.
Yeah.
And what I just noticed when I came to observe you 3 was that actually the dynamics, as you said, was quite okay. However, there was a lot of individual aspects that I saw in each and every one of you, and you all 3 of you had a very specific way of not using your full potential, a very specific a set of saboteurs that was actually building on each other in a negative way. And so if you would have kept doing this for 5 years in the way that you were now collaborating very well as your saboteurs were steering the wheels, it would have led to a lot of frustration. And
I'm sure it would.
It's
very much true. And also it happened at an interesting time, I think, because there were a lot of things happening just by accident, by coincidence, I would say. And so the type of discussions that working with you sparked were really interesting because we just went through a year of growth again. So those contexts I talked about in the beginning. So we've had 200% growth this year, and we're aiming to do that again next year with Nemesis. So we are definitely in a growth context, which also means a stress context on a personal level, because to have that type of growth as a founder, you commit everything. And so both time, pressure on family, all of those things that can happen. So it's a stressful context by design. but a good stress, it's also, I mean, stress has also qualities. It does good things for yourself. So we grow, we learn, and we evolve with the organization. So those conversations came at the exact right time, I think.
Yeah.
And they sparked some discussion.
Yeah, indeed. Is it okay if I share some of the dynamics that I noticed in the three of you?
I'm making an executive decision for Sydney Yale, but you can share.
All right, good. No, so that the listeners are
Sure.
are a bit up to date with the dynamics that I noticed. So basically, after observing the dynamics of the three of them, we decided to move forward with individual coaching programs to work on each and every theme individually. And also what I noticed was that we had a controller, being Johan.
Yes.
Then we had someone that really valued harmony and making people happy and really making sure that no one was frustrated. So that was a Sydney type. And then we had someone, Yael, very perfectionistic and kind of equating his identity to the quality and to the perfect work that he sets out there. And that needs to achieve 100% quality to feel okay with the work that he did. Yep. And so the dynamics that were arising between the two of you was that you can anticipate incredibly well. You always want to be on top of things, and you were always seeing everything and all the work that still had to be done. So you took, I think, 70% of the thinking responsibility on you, rather than just having it 30-30-30, and you just kept telling people what to do. Okay, you like, do this, you do that.
Like me, yeah.
Resulting in a lot of like underlying frustrations, but also a sense of control, because if you could just tell people what to do, you also felt in control. So you had a lot to gain with taking all these responsibilities, but in the end, your resentment would have been through the roof. Then you had a Sydney who is more of an intuitive leader and wants to make people happy. So he doesn't want to say no. He wants to do what's right to make a good atmosphere. And that's something that I notice with a lot of founders as well. They want to create a good atmosphere. They want people to be happy. They don't want to boss people around, because then they would feel really bad. And so Sydney, because of the extreme need for that harmony and the pleasing tendencies, he would listen and he would just perform and do whatever you told him to do. But it also took away all his sense of responsibility. So he didn't take fully his responsibility anymore, whereas he's the CEO of Nemesis. So very important that he can make decisions and take responsibility. So he really lost track of what I call his own manual, and leading from how he would lead, because it's very different than how you lead.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's, I think, also why you made him CEO. Maybe can you tell a bit?
It's exactly what I was thinking about as you were talking, is that without having the words, what you just explained, we didn't have that, but we initially felt that in our dynamic, the best decision based on common sense was to put Sydney CEO.
Yeah.
And it was a combination of decisions and learnings over the years, but through time I've learned at other organizations that I'm not the ideal CEO, even though I'm a natural leader profile. I'm a very red profile. I'm a directive profile, and I would typically be in that type of role. I've been in that role many times.
Yeah.
But it's how you make companies and make money. That's very clear. Having me as CEO is how you make money with an organization. But it's not how you make a lasting and sustainable organization that's great for people to be in. Yeah. And it's something I've learned at my previous job, to be honest, where I've seen what a CEO is supposed to be, in my eyes.
Yeah.
That does not per se have all the answers, but can bring thought leadership, can create a context in which people can be their best selves, I think.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in Sydney way more. And I've seen Sydney indeed the person that wants harmony and that can bring a group of people together, which are all qualities, to be clear, until they're no longer qualities when you bring them in the extreme, which is the self-sabotage you've talked about. So that was very evident, I think, from the beginning. And because one of the principles at Nemesis is do without ego, that was also like a very logical thing to let go of for me. And I'm not going to be that guy, and that's been a relief for me since I've decided that, and that I know, okay, this is just not me. So who am I, and where can I develop my own potential? Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Great. That's good. Yeah. So indeed, Sydney more the visionary, harmonious guy, and then you have Yael, who, if you equate your worth to the quality of your work. And there's so much work lying there. Of course, you're never going to say no. So also setting boundaries to this is just too much work is not an option if your work is your identity. So that type of sabotage also creates a lot of resentment. And I remember telling him, I believe you probably feel a lot of resentment. Is that correct? And he was like, well, that's spot on, actually. I feel it daily. And so after working with the three of you, you were able to, maybe I'll let you explain what you were able to, but Sydney was able to speak up more and to step into his role as CEO from his own strengths in the way that he does it. So not telling people how to do it, but also leaving space for them to come up with solutions, even if they're maybe not 100% what he would want. Yael also setting boundaries, being much better at knowing, okay, until where do I have to go until the work is 100%?
Yeah.
I don't have to have 120. I need to see what the client needs, and 100% is very often already much more than what they're used to. And then I'll let you tell you yourself.
So I think two things that stuck with me that I still think about daily, basically. And maybe there are some learnings I should have had and tell you now that I forgot. But one of them is definitely being able to understand and agree and accept that not everything is my responsibility.
Yeah.
And so being able to give that back to people and also communicate about that. And I think the communication and the tools there are the most useful of them all. And those are the things that all of us, both Yael, Sydney and myself, do a lot better now. And it's really, you can see it almost in our conversations or hear it when you're with us.
How?
Let's say about that responsibility.
Yeah.
If I see something that is driving me crazy because I think, what the fuck, it's not been done, it should have been done, I would have done it better, whatever. Instead of lashing out or instead of reacting in an emotional way, I could just point to the fact that this was your responsibility to do, or I can also anticipate a problem and say, by the way, this is your responsibility. Just giving that away gave me tremendous peace of mind, because then the problem is gone for me. And if you don't do it, then we can have a discussion about not taking responsibility. Yeah. So that I think is very useful.
Was it then that before it wasn't clear for you where your responsibility ended and the responsibility of the other one started, or?
No, I think the roles were always very clear. For me, what was frustrating is that if people don't take the responsibility, and they do it a couple of times, I start assuming that they won't take responsibility. And so I start just taking responsibility for myself, and I just take those things away from them.
Okay.
And start doing it, which is probably not empowering for them as well at some point. Not probably, which is not not empowering. But
so your basic assumption became, they're not going to do it. I need to do it.
Exactly. Talking about limiting beliefs, that was exactly it. Yeah. Other people are not taking the responsibility. That was almost the basic assumption.
So I need to take it.
So I need to take it.
All right.
Yeah, indeed. Good. So that's that. And then communication in general. Before things happen, just communicate clearly and know about this. And because we now more than understand our own dynamics, we also understand each other's dynamics. Because all of the work we've done with you, even privately, we've always spoke about it very openly with each other. Oh, I've done this with Eva, and I don't know, I had to eat grass or whatever, which is not true, by the way, but I had to do this or that. So we've spoken about it very openly, and that was what helped us, because we understood, okay, this is what's helping you or what's blocking you. And so we can also speak about it more openly, like, this, you better do this right, because if you don't do this right, it's going to frustrate me to no end. Yeah. Just communicating that early on is a reminder for the other, oh yeah, right, that's his trigger, let's not do that, and I'll take my responsibility. And so it became a virtuous circle as opposed to a vicious circle. Yeah.
Well, and it was funny because I very often heard the same situation played out
3 times.
Completely different 3 times from a completely different angle.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's also so important that you now know if there's a situation that causes frustration or certain emotions, that you communicate about the process, like what's going on, how do I interpret this, so that you know exactly what you're talking about, and that you don't have 3 completely different versions in which you you see the situation. Yeah, but so the moment that you all 3 went to the coaching program, I noticed that there was also a moment where all of a sudden there came a bit of friction in the dynamics, because the dynamics were good as they were, because you were all supporting each other in your limiting saboteurs. But once you all stood in your power, there were some frictions because all of a sudden Yael didn't say yes to everything anymore. And so how did you deal with that?
So every change or every shift in equilibrium needs to refine its balance. And so obviously there was an adjustment period. And it also needed, it required the full belief or assumption that we were all committing to the same level.
Yeah.
Because this only works if everyone commits. So if everyone takes their rightful place or position or acts the way they need to act, if one of them doesn't, it will reinforce some limiting beliefs for others, and it will maybe even shift the other way, which isn't really not what we want, or can even break the system. We were lucky that we all came into this together. We all knew what we were getting into. We all knew that it would require some changes. And so we all committed, I think. Pretty much at the same speed, so maybe with a couple of weeks difference, but we all committed, we all went for it, and I think that's where we were able to find an equilibrium quite quickly, I think, after that happens. And so far so good.
Well, what you also do, and I really like it as a concept, so maybe you can tell it to the listeners, it's
sure.
Whenever I noticed that there was some friction, you call out bonding night.
Yeah.
Can you explain that
nights,
concept, what it is, and when you do it?
So in the growth that we know now, it's pretty much impossible to still have like off moments, which we had in the beginning, the first year of Nemesis. Now we don't have them at all. We're just submersed in work, in challenges, in not problems, but challenges. Every day they just need to be solved due to our growth. If you double every year, obviously you face new problems. So we've noticed that putting those bonding nights in there, which are basically just evenings, three of us together, we go have dinner and have a drink, where we can just spend the first hour venting about operational stuff, which is just needed. And then we end up speaking about way more meaningful stuff. And it can either be strategy, like where are we going to company, or it can be like personal stuff or other things that just need to be solved. We have those like every other week, I think, or every 2 weeks we try to organize them, or we organize them in like an urgency format when there is just too much pressure or just something that needs to be solved. Then when we do that.
And you're not afraid to call things out. And it's two of your principles, being brutally honest and being egoless. It's tremendously inspiring to see how you dare to call each other out, because you just know that it's from a good intention and it's to help each other grow, because it requires courage. And it's something that I rarely see founders do, because there's still this belief that you have to hold things together, or if you make too much, like if you're called out on something, maybe you're not performing good enough. But for you guys, it's not at all how you see your personal growth. You actually see it as we need to call each other out because we're co-responsible for each other's growth, because each other's growth is responsible for the growth of Nemesis, and that is that's amazing.
That's again why we do branding. That's why we believe that the branding is more than design. Is if you have a common belief, a common vision of where you go, and a couple set of principles, like you just mentioned, be brutally honest, do without ego, and raise the bar, which are our principles at Nemesis. If you have those in common, then you serve those. And it's no longer about I believe that and I think that. No, we're all serving that same thing. So as long as we're aligning there, and we all are doing it with good intentions, nothing can go wrong. And so that's what we agreed on years ago. Like, this is the set of context in which we will work and how we will do things. We also have the same beliefs, which is why we made this company together. And so sticking to those principles is very crucial for us, because it's a way to be unconditionally ourselves, and we can just do that. And as long as that works, then this project makes sense, and the concept of Nemesis and the journey we're on makes sense. As long as if that ever stops, I think it will stop making sense for all of us, and then we will just do something else.
Do you recommend people to have do you have personal principles as well, or is it something that you
No, I haven't formalized them at all. I'm sure everyone has. Everyone has some non-negotiables based on their childhood, on their upbringing, and their value systems, which can be a combination of just things you believe in, maybe religion, maybe a set of experiences you had through life. I don't know if I recommend really putting them into words. Probably it's good to think about them, and those are good exercises to at least think, what do I try to achieve in life, and what are my non-negotiables? It's obviously useful. It's part of the work we do when we work on an organization, because it starts from the founder, and then will extrapolate that to the organization and understand how do we behave now as a company. But as a company, yes, absolutely, you need to do it because it has a lot of impact in collaboration.
Yeah.
For yourself, it's about, okay, what decisions do I make? What do I do? What don't I do? Those are maybe your non-negotiables. But as an organization, they're crucial because if you can't agree on the rules in playing together, it's impossible to do anything meaningful.
Yeah.
And so having those principles formalized, written down, is also your filter for who gets to join the party.
Yeah.
So if I want to hire someone, okay, skills is one thing. It's very easy to hire for skills. You can do this or you cannot do this. But will you fit? How will you join my culture? How will you impact your culture? So it's not just about culture fit, but also what can you bring extra to the culture without transgressing our principles. So if your principles are there, no one that gets added into the pool can change one of those principles, but they can add color and flavor and do whatever around that. But the principles we all share. And so those are your non-negotiables as an organization.
I like that. All right, good. We'll go to the end of the podcast.
Sure.
So there, I always ask my guests the same set of questions, and one of them you already answered a bit. But let's say the first question is, okay, what did you do 10 years ago in terms of not being in your full potential of self-sabotage that you don't do anymore today?
Two things. So one of them is linked to those principles, and I think something that my previous employer, but also the luck of Yale and Sydney gave me, is that I've let go of ego. Ego is my biggest battle in my life, I think. It also serves a purpose. Ego is there for a reason, and it gives me a lot of good things.
Yeah.
But that fight against my ego is probably the lifelong fight I have.
Okay.
Which I think I do a lot better. Which was, for example, being able to accept that, okay, I'll probably not be that CEO. Probably that's not me, and I'm another type of role.
Yeah.
It's given me way more than it's ever cost me. So I think that's one of the big ones throughout that. And then the other one is the one we just discussed, which we've solved or trying to solve through our sessions. But it's really about that control and really making sure that I can give others the responsibility.
Yeah.
And I don't have that need to control everything, which is giving me peace of mind again once I get to let them go.
Yeah, and in that control, you want to get rid of the control, but evolving towards the trust.
Yeah.
Because I remember that's indeed, in the end, what you want to
Absolutely.
fully embrace. Not only trust in others, but also trust in yourself. And that's also...
Absolutely right. Yeah.
All right. And how did you do that, overcoming that ego or going more to that trust and let go of that control?
The ego part, I think strong examples, strong role models helped me to see like what could happen if you do it well.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to have someone in front of you to show what it could be.
And was it a known person or that someone that you...
No, I'm not an international famous person.
Okay.
I mean, just someone I know and someone I've seen and I admire and I saw if they do it well, what can happen.
Yeah.
So I think that was powerful for me. And in terms of like, for example, the control, it's about daily practices and also having people keep you accountable. That's what helps.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so powerful that we've done this, the three of us, and that we've talked about it. Because then I can also commit to something. So, okay, I'll try to do this now, which is what I've seen with Eva, and this is now how I'm going to try to apply it.
Yeah.
And if I don't do it, I have someone to keep me accountable, which is very much what our dynamic is about.
Yeah.
Because we have, like we talked about, the CEO role, which in the organization has a very clear role description, things you do. It also means that if we're ever in a tie, he's the casting vote, the final vote, I would say.
Yeah.
But in 5 years, we've never been in that situation. We've never had to have a CEO say, okay, now this is what we decide because we're not agreeing. We've always agreed so far. And so that dynamic, I think, works very well and we keep each other accountable.
Okay, good. Yeah. And let's say that I ask you this question in 15 years again. What would you want to be able to tell me then that you did today that you got rid of in terms of self-sabotage?
Good question. Well, I think it's probably about trusting others and trusting myself that I find the limits and that others do their jobs and take their responsibility. If I can let that go completely, that would be a big win.
Yeah. And what would it look like to let that go completely? How would your life be differently influenced?
Good question. I think I'll have a lot less frustration throughout the day, the year, the week.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. I think we would let go of all of that frustration if you can just leave people be. And they'll be able to reach their full potential. I'll be able to reach my full potential. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much what it is.
And if you have less frustration, and I'm always curious then what is there? If there's no control, if there's no frustration, if there's trust, what would you feel on a day-to-day basis?
Bliss, things going well, growth, learning, evolving, something meaningful.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Yep, definitely.
And any plans on how you're going to do that?
I'll stay in touch with you, and then we'll continue some of our sessions. I'll make sure that I have the support system around me to keep myself accountable.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lifelong learning. Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, this is the end.
Yeah.
You're
thank you very
always
much.
welcome whenever you want to
I'll be back at some point.
dig a bit deeper. And then to all of you listeners, thank you very much for listening in today. I learned a lot today. I hope you did too. And if you know someone, a founder of a fast-growing company that might benefit from listening to this podcast, send this episode to them, and together we create a world where everyone dares to be great. See you next time. Ciao.